In future presidential election cycles, could it be that they change up the primary schedule, maybe moving Nevada and South Carolina first, maybe putting multiple primaries on the same day? It appears that former Nevada Senator Harry Reid is chatting up exactly some of those possibilities with Congressman Jim Clyburn.
Interesting. So back to discuss, CEO of Pine Street Strategies, Democratic strategist Don Calloway, and co-host of the Realignment podcast, Marshall Kosloff. Don, let me start with you. This is really interesting. One of the things I saw is that Iowa and New Hampshire's nightmare has always been that a Democratic president or a president gets elected without having had to win either of their two states and therefore could change the primary cycle. His name is Joe Biden. That actually happened here, especially given now that we saw the horrible meltdown in Iowa. They have very good reason for why Jamie Harrison and others could change this to whatever they want. So how do you see that change in the cycle and how it could dramatically affect the future of Democratic politics?
It would dramatically affect the future of Democratic politics. First of all, let me just say writ large, bravo. This is long overdue, regardless of whether or not the Iowa caucus was an absolute disaster in 2020. For a long time, particularly as this multiracial coalition has started to define the Democratic Party, the big tent that we are, for a long time now, at least 20 years, we've been having the conversation about why does Iowa dictate so, and New Hampshire, two of the whitest states that exist, why do they dictate so much about the future of this country? South Carolina, Nevada are clearly more representative of what the country actually looks like, clearly even more specifically representative of what the new Democratic Party looks like. And there's just no real reason anymore for Iowa to hold such an important sway over not only Democratic politics, but national politics. Because the reality of the matter is, not many people survived, with Joe Biden being the exception, not many people survive after not having a quality showing in Iowa and New Hampshire.
Right.
So I welcome this. I don't know what the process looks like on the other end of this, but I do know it's long overdue, and it just would be a so much better representation of what our party actually believes our nominee should be.
Yeah, so here are my beefs with Iowa. Number one, they totally, royally, insanely screwed up the caucuses this year. Number two, they have totally, royally, insanely screwed up the politics and the policy around corn. And it's a big reason why, like, when you go to the grocery store, every single food item that contains corn or high fructose corn syrup or whatever in it, Marshall. But, you know, what's interesting to me, though, one of the things that Don said is he said, well, with the exception of Barack Obama probably wouldn't have gotten the Democratic nomination if he hadn't gone through Iowa first. That was kind of the proving ground for him that convinced voters in places like South Carolina that, oh, the white people are okay with this guy too. Maybe he actually has a shot. So, I mean, I'm in favor of the move. I think Nevada and South Carolina would be better representative to go first, but that's an interesting counter narrative.
Yeah, and the real key thing here is that the thing that I'd critique here, and I want to echo Don's point that this is about way more than what happened in 2020 in terms of the really poor management of the caucus. That's been something that people have been bringing up for a long time and has nothing to do with whether or not the caucus was perfectly executed or not. I think making it about the technical feasibility, it is going to unfairly bias things towards the status quo because they have 4 years to fix the app. So I really suggest that someone get on that at this point. Someone could launch a firm to focus on that. But broadly speaking, though, the point that you're making, Crystal, about Iowa as a proving ground is really important. And that's why it goes to the part I'll quibble a little bit with Don is the metric isn't just what does the Democratic Party look like? The metric is what order of states produces a nominee who could win the election. What order of states produces a nominee that can win the popular vote? That's something that Democrats pretty much have had handled since the 1990s. But then what Democrat can win the Electoral College is the big issue here. So while I would say it's important that states like South Carolina go very early, because once again, part of something that was revealed because of South Carolina was that Joe Biden had this really strong base in like the older, blacker parts of the Democratic Party. There also needs to be, though, a recognition that there are these states like Iowa, there are these states like New Hampshire that do actually matter. Hillary barely won New Hampshire in 2016. Mm-hmm. So as we're thinking about this, we're going to have to, well, not we, but whoever's in charge of the Democratic Party, and because this also applies to Republicans as well, too, when it comes to this order, they're going to have to balance reflecting the base of the party, reflecting the fact that there are these battleground states, and reflecting the fact that there's a difference between the campaign you're running in a primary and the campaign you're going to have to run in a general election during a hyper-polarized political climate.
What do you make of that, Don? I think it's an excellent point because, to the Obama example, the reason why Iowa mattered, right, is because it's a small enough state, and it's one where you can actually visit, like all 99 counties, if you want. You can actually go around in the retail politics. This is somewhere where national politics, at least until 2016, wasn't the sole determinant of the way that people were going to vote. Now, I'm not saying Iowa should go first or not, but to Marshall's point, should there not be a proving ground of like a Michigan or some sort of swing state very early in the calendar in order to validate the Electoral College concern?
Sure, there absolutely should be. But again, the Electoral College concern is, I think it's critical, and I think it's an important piece, but I think it's no more than 1/3. I think that, first of all, you have to give a voice to the entire demographic, and that's not just racial. That is working class, that is types of jobs, that is urban versus rural. You have to give consideration, you have to give a voice in the process to the entire demographic of the Democratic Party. Regional people in the Southwest generally don't have a say until the process is far down the road and well determined. So I think there's a lot of different considerations here, not just electoral viability. Obviously, electoral viability is a tremendous part of it. The right combination of states could have had Bernie Sanders be the nominee after the first in the nation week. And I'm not sure that that's something that everybody in the Democratic Party would have been happy with. But I do think the Democrats are going to have to put their heads together and come together with what elements matter the most. And I think certainly electoral college viability, winning a general election, matters so much in that discussion. But I really think that from where we are writ large as a party, there's no sense in making this change if it's still not going to be representative of a broad swath of the Democratic Party primary electorate. So you can throw South Carolina in there, which I would love to see them be early, but what do the people in Georgia have to say about that?
Yep.
What do the people in Mississippi have to say about that? They're just as black in Georgia and Mississippi as far as weighing in on the primary side as they are in South Carolina. So there's so many different, there are labor workers that you see in Michigan and Indiana. There are so many different elements of our Big Tent party that want to be heard. And I think the party is obligated to find a way to make this happen equitably. I don't know that that means everybody's happens on the first day of the nation, but I do think it means that we have to invest serious time in making sure that everyone feels heard.
Well, and Marshall, what's interesting about the idea of pairing Nevada and South Carolina together is that South Carolina is a state that the establishment of the party feels very comfortable with. They got Clyburn there. This is a state that has gone a lot of times for establishment-backed candidates. But you throw Nevada in the mix, and that was a state, obviously, that was Bernie Sanders' best performance this time around. It is that working class. It's younger. It's a big union state. So when you kind of put those two together, it does make a lot of the factions in the Democratic Party, I think, feel more comfortable.
Yeah, and the key thing, too, is that Nevada is also a state that Democrats could conceivably win and do win routinely in the fall. So that's an important part here because, like I said before, I think the real way of summing up my thinking on this is that you need to balance it. And balancing, look, the reality of, establishment power within the Democratic Party, that's a real thing, regardless of how you feel about the policies they push. But then also recognizing that there are these swing states like Nevada that are diverse in a way that's different than the diversity in South Carolina, that do represent the union part, that represent the very much industry part, that fits all together. You need to mix that you need to mix those two things while also keeping in mind that, I'm not an Iowa stan here, but I do just appreciate the articulation people are having. I think this was you, Sagar, of how it is important that there is a state where people who can get to know you, right? Like say what you want about, Mayor, now Secretary Pete, but the fact that he had an opportunity to spend a lot of time in Iowa and get to know voters, at least enough that he could perform well there, that's very important. And the fact that big name national politicians like Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, the fact that they couldn't compete well in an intimate state like that was actually very important. And there's a lot going on there, and we need to find a way to balance those in both parties.
Well, your Mayor Pete argument just made me despise Iowa. So thank you, Marshall.
That's funny.
Gentlemen, great to see you
Thanks,
both.
guys. Appreciate it.
Good to see y'all.
Next on Rising, David Dayen. He's going to discuss this coalition calling on big tech and exploitation of user data. That's when Rising continues.